What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. Joining me today is columnist Jimmy Watkins, good friend of the pod, and someone that I enjoy having a little bit more fun with on this podcast when it comes to topics that you guys might want to hear regarding the Cleveland Cavaliers. Today's topic that we're going to start with is what's going on trend-wise with this team when it comes to interesting versus sustainability. And Jimmy, I know you came a little bit prepared today when it comes to what might be the most interesting concept that the Cavs have been able to do to start the season. 27 games in, hit us with it. What you got?
I continue to be impressed and frankly flummoxed by this idea that Kenny Atkinson has found a way to basically build the best offense in the league with both bigs on the floor. My most intriguing trend is the Cavs' offensive rating when Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley share the court, which is, I just had the tab pulled up. I have too many lineup data things up right now. It's like 121 point something, which is good enough to be at or near the top of the league still 27 games into the season. This was like the biggest question facing the construction of this Cavs team, right? Because it's a question, how good can your offense be with two non-shooting bigs on the floor? Of course, the Cavs are challenging Evan Mobley to redefine himself and change his ID as a non-shooting big. He's taken a career high 17 point. His 3-point attempt rate is 17.9%, which is up from, it's been no higher than like 10 or 11 his entire career. That's a major jump. They are pushing him to do that. So it's curious and interesting in that regard because we had all these questions. We have, by the way, a lot of data, playoff data and regular season data from last year at least, that suggested, I don't know how good your offense can be when you have these two guys on the court together. It gets a little constricted out there for the guards, and the ball gets a little sticky on offense. The Cavs look stagnant when they play these guys together against a set defense. But now the Cavs are making it so that the defense are making it as hard as possible for the defense to stay set at all times. Someone's always moving the ball. Even if you're dribbling with a purpose, right? There's way less aimless wandering with one of the main ball handlers, would be Darius or Donovan around the top of the key. Everything is happening with a purpose. A lot more off-ball movement from guys like Max Strus, Sam Merrill, your shooters that bring a ton of gravity. But it's also, the flip side of this is that like the Cavs are here in the first place. They are here in the Donovan Mitchell sense, in the Kenny Atkinson sense. The reason JB Bickerstaff in some ways was a victim of his own success. Like the Jarrett Allen, Evan Mobley pairing worked so well defensively that the Cavs accelerated their timeline, traded for Donovan Mitchell, built the best defense in the NBA during the regular season 2 years ago. And in a weird way, that's part of the reason JB is no longer here anymore, right? Because because they built such a great defense, that it raised questions about, okay, well, how can we raise our ceiling here? Well, it's great that we have a great defense. How can we turn it into good offense? So it's the thing that you built this really strong core around. As good as Donovan has been since he's been here, and as good as Darius has been when he's been healthy over the last few years, the core of this has always been the defense, which the defense is good with one elite rim protector on the court. But when you can funnel drivers to two of them, that's when the Cavs defense has always been at its best. So it's both ends of the spectrum. That's why it was such a big question. And I still wonder how they will make this work in the playoffs. I still have my questions about how many Evan Mobley threes are you cool with in a playoff series? Like, it's cool to say in a regular season context, Oh yeah, we want him shooting. I think Kenny had said after the game where he went 3 for 5 a couple of weeks ago, I'd like to see that every night. Well, it's not always going to be 3 for 5, and it's not. And there's an extra tightness, as we've talked about, with some of the more prolific shooters on this team that comes with shooting those threes in the playoffs. So we still have questions ahead, but we every time we mention the playoffs, we're getting way too far ahead of ourselves. I just think for where they are right now, 23-4, first in the East, best record in the league. That is the most impressive trend, most intriguing trend, a trend that could frankly change the trajectory of the franchise for me.
I think that's a really good one. One, because we, like you said, we talk about how important that tandem is for this entirety, like the entirety of this organization. And one, it extends the time period for Jared Allen as a Cavalier, but it also can show you what they can and can't do with them off the floor, right? And I think we talk a lot about splitting minutes and how Kenny Atkinson has been able to do that at a high level this season, finding rotations and mismatches and matchups to attack when it comes to splitting those guys up or having them both on the floor. Like, I know it's the Washington Wizards, but I was talking to one of the beat writers from them, and they were like, oh, yeah, they changed their entire starting lineup because of that. And we saw that last season in the playoffs with the Orlando Magic when they went with Jonathan Isaac. And then they said, oh, we need a little bit more strength, so we're going to go with Wendell Carter Jr. halfway through that series. So I think it's interesting how that dynamic can throw other teams off. And that was just because of their size. Now you throw in their offensive capabilities. And a lot of that, Jimmy, as we know, is because of how they've been utilized as offensive hubs this season, whether handling the ball or Jared Allen at the free throw line being a DHO runner for the Cavs, and then being able to run split action with Darius Garland, Evan Mobley, all these different things. It's a lot of fun to watch. And as you mentioned, that duo has an offensive rating of 121.9, which would be at the top of the NBA, and have a defensive rating of 109.9 for a net rating of 11.9, which is incredible to think about, and would be second in the NBA in net rating, only behind the Oklahoma City Thunder, who are just off to a crazy start to the season. And those numbers could change after tonight's NBA Cup game. And I have to mention that because we respect the Cup on this podcast. But Jimmy, on to the next topic. What do you think is the most sustainable trend for the Cleveland Cavaliers? Because my favorite thing that I've seen this season from the Cavs is their shooting percentages. That's the most impressive thing to me when it comes to how they're shooting almost 40% from three as a team. Seven different players who have played 15 games or more are averaging 40% or better from three-point range. And they have 3 of the top 10 players in the NBA when it comes to players who have played in 20 games, averaging 15 minutes or more this season. It's just been lights out. But I again don't think that's sustainable when it comes to the Cavs. So I want to pick your brain on what is sustainable for this team.
This might be cheating a little bit, but to me, it's the Evan Mobley offensive boon, because as we've mentioned before, big men are so frequently at the mercy of their surroundings to get the ball. But Kenny Atkinson had barely taken his suit off in his opening press conference when he said, we want to get Evan the ball more. Every time he speaks into a microphone about Evan Mobley, it's about getting him the ball more and having him shoot more. And everything the Cavs have showed us to this point in the season is that they want to get Evan Mobley the ball more. Career high in field goal attempts per game, career high in three-point attempts per game, career high in scoring right now, career high in usage rate. I mentioned the career high in three-point attempt rate. They are being very intentional about this. They are making this, in some regard, the Evan Mobley lab year. As like they are trying to get as much out of him. They're trying to develop him as much as they can during a regular season, and so far he's handling it pretty well, to the point where I kind of wonder, like, what happens if you go from, what's he at right now, like 12 and a half shots a game? What happens if he goes to 15? What happened? Because you could still tell like he's playing with way more force around the rim. In particular, that's one of the most encouraging signs for me. The confidence with which he's shooting threes is something that his teammates talk about all the time. I also love that. I still think sometimes he's a little bit too drifty. I feel like there's more drifty and nonchalant with when he gets a rebound and there's opportunities to push. I feel like I want to see Evan Mobley. Like if I'm Kenny Atkinson, so Kenny's thing is I want to see Evan shoot 5 threes a game. That's great. He should want to see that. I would also want to see one attempt at a 90-foot Giannis Antetokounmpo-esque drive, even if it goes poorly. Even if you end up losing the ball, or even if you end up crashing and burning and you go a little bit too fast for yourself, I want to see more of that because I think those are opportunities. You can get anytime you push the ball, you can get cross matches, right? Where you have someone defending on someone who isn't necessarily their man just because the ball came up so fast. It's like, okay, this is the nearest person to me. When the ball handler is 7 feet tall, that creates all kinds of confusion for a defense. And so I think given how well Evan has responded to the early season bump in usage, and particularly, I've said this a few times, particularly Cavs are 23-4. Like they are virtually guaranteed to get one of the top 2 seeds, and they got a pretty good shot at the 1 seed. That should be a priority, of course, because you want to have home court against Boston. But like, you have the breathing room to, if it comes to this, get out of your rhythm a little bit to try and see what else, like how much further can we scratch the surface on Evan Mobley? What else is in there? I want to know what else he's doing in the practice gym that hasn't shown up in the games yet. It just feels like for so long the Evan Mobley give him the ball conversation was like for the last couple of years, it was like, for what? Like we see what happens when he gets the ball. He looks a little squirmish out there, and he doesn't look comfortable shooting these jumpers, and he's kind of getting bodied down there. Well, now he's not. Now you've given him the ball, and now he's giving you results. So now I want to see, like, let's see what that next step looks like. I don't know why we have to. I'm sure that like there's because we've had a couple of smallish breaks here, bigger for the NBA season for Kenny, right? Like during the NBA Cup stuff, they've had more time off. I'd be watching these next couple of games carefully to see, because they can, especially when they're playing like against Brooklyn and Washington, be interested to rewatch those. I've been running around with my hair on fire this week due to Browns Ohio State and frankly car trouble. But I'm gonna you go back and watch those, like against those kinds of teams, you can kind of win however you choose to win. So how they choose to win is interesting to me. How they choose to go about their business coming out of these breaks, now that they've actually had some practice in R&R and some time themselves, like we're doing. The coaching staff is doing something very similar to what we're doing, which is looking at trends and saying what's working, what's not working. The things that are working, we want to do. Maybe we want to push those boundaries a little bit further. Hint, hint, Evan Mobley. The stuff that isn't working, maybe we want to try other stuff. Maybe they're going to change up something about their 3-point defense. I don't know. But what I'm seeing is Evan Mobley looking pretty comfortable in a higher usage role. So what happens if we push him a little further?
I think that's interesting. I like that a lot when it comes to, because we talked about it coming into the season, like there are going to be games where he doesn't play well, even though they're going to lean on him. Like, and it's more about how he responds to that than like if he is putting up terrific numbers every night, right? So if he, and it seems like, and he's shown it a couple times already, where he's struggling in some games and then bounced back. Like for me, it's maybe not even struggled, but I look back to the Boston Celtics game, the first game that they lost of the season, where Evan didn't get the ball in the fourth quarter after going off in the first 3, and then coming back into the next game, and Kenny Atkinson was like, here you go. I don't care if you play well, if you crash and burn, you're getting the ball, and you have to show us what you're going to do with it. And I like the example of the Giannis 90-foot drive, but I don't necessarily, my counterpoint to that is I don't necessarily think that's entirely fair to Evan, just because we've seen him get a block on the defensive end, run the floor, get the ball at the 3-point line, and then just simply attack the defender in front of him without hesitation. So
more. I'm saying more. I like seeing
right.
that. Let's see more. Let's see what happens. Like that's a situation where he made a play, felt comfortable, had a coast to coast drive. I like that. I want to push him outside of his comfort zone. I want, and I'm sure Kenny is in his ear all the time when he gets a rebound. Push, 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 push. I think you have this blank canvas here on a 22, 23-year-old kid that has clearly the last couple of years been leaving some potential in the locker room. I don't want to do that anymore. I want to see what else is there. And I like your point about how he responds to adversity. I want to put him through adversity. I want to push. I want to see where his limits are. It's great that he's getting 18 points per game, really, really efficiently. But like, I don't think he can. But why not? Like, let's try to see if Evan Mobley could be a volume scorer for a week. Why not? Like, you're 23-4. You have, honestly, you've mostly like accomplished about 70% of your regular season goal already. Kenny's doing a good job managing the minutes. You are set up so beautifully for a top 1 or 2 seed. And this is the player, particularly this side of the ball, when he has it, is one of the most important factors in how the postseason will go and how the next 3 years of this team looks. So I really don't think there should be any stone left unturned in trying to maximize his potential. And by the way, I'm not saying that they're not doing this. Kenny has been, like I said, from day one, telling you that this is what we want to do. So I'm excited to see what it looks like now that he's had a hearty dose of more, and I want to see what more than more looks like.
All right, and you mentioned the 1 seed and the 2 seed, and I want to pick your brain because I was looking back to our preseason expectations for this team. I read Chris's and mine, and I was just about to pull up yours while we were doing this. And I believe I had them at 51-31. Chris had them at 52-30. Do you recall what you had them?
So, okay, this is tricky because I didn't do one this year because I had family stuff going on around that time. But what I was planning on doing, no one's going to believe me, but what I wrote last year is that I thought that the Cavs could be a regular season wins juggernaut and that they could get a top 2 seed and make the conference finals strictly on the strength of their regular season record. They could avoid seeing Boston until the Western Conference Finals.
Eastern Conference
Finals. And I was thinking about running that take back again this year just because there was so much good energy around Kenny. But you can believe me or not. I'll tell you that you can it's on the internet that I thought that the Cavs could be a regular season juggernaut last year. That's what I'll say.
I will vouch for you because like I said, I've said this on the podcast a couple of times. You were the first person that we talked to saying that they could be the number 2 seed. And you said that during the summer. And that was before or kind of around the same time that they got Kenny Atkinson and we first started getting a vibe check on him. So I will vouch for you on that because I remember you saying that. And that was the first time that I was like, they could do that. And then a lot of national media started coming out with kind of a similar take as well. Jimmy, I think this could be a 60-win team. Actually, I think that should be the floor for this season based on where they're at right now. Like, sure, floor being 60 wins, 22 losses sounds crazy, but I feel like you can also look at who they have on the record, what every team is going through, because the amount of injuries that have plagued the NBA this season is astronomical. And when you talk about where the Cavs are, what they're going to be getting back in Max Strus and how he can impact the team and also be kind of another trade acquisition kind of player that you didn't have for the entirety of the season. Chris and I talked about this on the last podcast, how this was kind of a unfortunate but fortunate situation for the Cavs last year with Evan Mobley and Darius Garland. This year, you're getting a different kind of player, and that'll get into our second segment of this podcast. But 60 wins, right? You're already at 23. You need you need 37 more. Like what? Why wouldn't you be able to do that when you still have to face teams like the Spurs and the Wizards again and the Toronto Raptors? There are winnable games, and I also think that the Cavs are at the point in their journey that they have proven that they can take some of the better teams in the NBA, quote unquote, better teams in the NBA, because we talked about early into the season how the Cavs had one of the easiest schedules to start the year, but that didn't take into account that the 76ers were without Joel Embiid. That didn't take into account that the Milwaukee Bucks were without Chris Middleton and still trying to figure themselves out. The Milwaukee Bucks playing in the NBA Cup championship, again, we respect the Cup, one of the best teams in the NBA right now. So, and on the one of the hottest streaks. So, and they get to test that out on Friday. But is this a team that can challenge those teams when they have their best players on the court? I believe they are. And I think they've gotten and proven that they have done enough to show that early on into the season. But Jimmy, going into the next segment, what happens when Max Strus comes back? And I know there's a lot of fun ways we can do this. My intention is to do a start bench trade, because when you look at the contracts of Isaac Okoro, Dean Wade, and Max Strus, to me, they're tradable, right? They don't have too much stipulation. The one that I believe might be the most difficult is because they have already said that Isaac Okoro's contract is $38 million with $33 million guaranteed. But when it comes to all three of these players being healthy, and I'm going to let you get into it first, who are you starting, who are you benching, and who are you trading, hypothetically, when it comes to Max Strus, Dean Wade, and Isaac Okoro? Because there have been so many different things come out on the internet lately when it comes to top trade prospects and all those different things. I'm going to read this one list from The Athletic of an updated 2024-2025 NBA trade board with players on here that could be on the market. Jimmy Butler, Zach LaVine, Cam Johnson, who the Cavs we already know a lot about, Brandon Ingram, DeAndre Hunter, another guy, Bojan Bogdanovic, Bruce Brown, Colin Sexton, Robert Williams III, Dorian Finney-Smith, another guy. So, Jimmy, what you doing? Start, bench, trade.
Okay, so a couple things here. First, on the real quick to the Cavs win total, they are on pace for basically 70 wins right now, 69.8. I just did the math real quick on my phone. I think I did it right. I think it's 23 times 82 divided by 27. Is that how we do cross multiplying? If math teachers, hit us at subtext. I'm not sure, but I think that's right. I do think that they will win 60 games. But I also think there is a swoon coming. This 3-point shooting is not sustainable. 23-4 is not sustainable. They know this. So right now, let's all agree as a Cavs basketball watching public to not overreact whenever the Cavs do inevitably cool off from three and lose, 3 out of 5, even gasp 5 in a row. Because to your point about the Milwaukees and the Phillies, basically, I'm at the point where I think they can at least hang in a playoff series with everyone that's not Boston. They might be favored in a playoff series against everyone that's not Boston. Maybe the Knicks. We'll see how the Knicks round into shape as we get past the All-Star break. That being said, I think the Cavs have kind of told us how they feel, and I think I agree with them about these three players. Max Strus is under contract for multiple years. Dean Wade's under contract for multiple years. Isaac Okoro is not. Now, this is partially a function of how the market has operated. The Cavs got Dean Wade on a very, very team-friendly extension. What is that 3 years, 30 that they gave Dean Wade? If that, or 3, let me look up his
3 years, 18.5.
3 years, 18. My goodness. For one of the most impactful defenders in the NBA. We're still, I think, less so with Dean Wade, but still like that 3-point shot in the injury history probably contributes to that valuation a little bit. On the open market, I promise you, Dean Wade is worth more than that on the open market. If he never improves as a 3-point shooter and he keeps getting hurt just as much as he does right now, he's more valuable than that. That's a very team-friendly contract. But Max Strus on the MLE, the heat culture part of it, the playoff know-how, the shooting. You obviously trust Max Strus as a shooter more than you trust any of the rest of these guys. He's cemented himself very quickly as a leader in that locker room to the point where he's helping the team install their zone defense right at the beginning of the season. I just think here's an obvious statement. This is a very big season for Isaac Okoro and his future with this team. The Cavs basically during the summer told Isaac, you don't want to sign the qualifying offer? Go make us offer you more than that. And he came back, he said, oops, I can't. And I said, okay, well, we'd love to have you back. We value everything you do. You're one of our best defensive players. You're improving as a 3-point shooter, albeit as an uncontested 3-point shooter, but that's what you are in this league. People don't guard you, and those shots are starting to go in more, so we like that. They're going in even more often now. People still aren't guarding him, and he's still a very, very good defensive player who has a lot of value to this team. He's very difficult to replace. But I think, again, it's like the Max Strus has sort of the... Would you say? I think you could argue Max Strus is kind of the heartbeat to this team. Like, I bet you, obviously Max Strus hasn't played yet this season, but there's a lot. I bet you there's a lot of Max Strus happening behind the scenes. A lot of Max Strus in meetings, a lot of Max Strus pep talks in practice. Like, Max Strus is present. His fingerprints are still on this 23-4 start, even though he hasn't played yet, right? So I just think that if Isaac can, and I don't know that he can, but if Isaac can cement himself as somebody who actually needs to be attended to without the ball in the playoffs, then that can change this equation a little bit. If Isaac is a legit 3-and-D wing, then I think you can start to have the conversation that Max Strus is a little bit more replaceable than these other two dudes just because of what Dean and Isaac mean defensively to this team. As I've said before, I just think the barrier of proof, we have such a long sample size of Isaac Okoro being shaky during playoff time with his 3-point shot that I think he's the odd man out right now. So I would go start Dean Wade, bench Max Strus, or trade Isaac Okoro.
Okay, so without Chris Fedor here as mayor of Dean Wade Island, Jimmy has.
I told you I'm running against him.
I like that. Okay, but Jimmy, when are we going to have the conversation that Isaac Okoro is a true 3? Obviously, we understand.
Not now.
The playoffs.
Not now. Not during the regular season. I'm sorry. I don't care what his 3-point percentage is until April. I really don't. I know that's not fun, and I know we're supposed to enjoy the regular season for what it is. And I've seen this take a lot, and it's a valid opinion to say that, well, we can't control what happens in the playoffs in December, so we're just supposed to not enjoy what we're seeing. I'm not saying that. You should enjoy Isaac Okoro shooting 49% from 3. But if you think that's sustainable or anything close, when every year in the playoffs, his minutes have been cut at the very least because he is a liability on offense in the playoffs, I mean, that is what matters more to me, because that is the basketball that will be. That's how the Cavs will be judged, is in the playoffs. We've learned this how many times now? 2 years in a row and counting. That's how Isaac Okoro is going to be judged. There is no conversation about Isaac Okoro being a legit 3-and-D wing until I see it in the playoffs, or until teams start. We can start the conversation. I'm talking write the first capital letter of the conversation when teams start respecting him from 3-point range. We're just not there.
And I hear you, and I think they are starting to. I mean, he's shooting almost 50% from 3-point range on the season. It's ridiculous, right? And the other night, and it's happened a couple times over the season, but the other night it was very profound, especially on social media. where a Brooklyn Nets player, I don't remember who it was closing out on Isaac Okoro on a 3-point shot, and he went to his patented jab step drive to the hoop and got a layup, right? So that was what we had seen that we wanted to get rid of a couple of seasons ago when it comes to just immediately going to the jab step. Instead, in this case, he utilized his speed and agility, pump faked, and got to the basket. So it's kind of the duality of both of those different things. So let's talk about these contracts first and foremost. I think I might have gone backwards here, but let's do this now. Isaac Okoro signed a 3-year, $33 million contract with the Cavs, including a $38 million contract with the Cavs, and $33 million of that being guaranteed, right? So, with that being said, that means like 11 per year, basically. And it's interesting to see what that will mean for the Cavs going forward. Obviously, it's a lot less than Dean Wade's 3-year, 18.5. So Isaac becomes an unrestricted free agent after the 2027 season. So he's on for another 3 years. Dean Wade becomes an unrestricted free agent after the 2026 season. Max Strus signed a 4-year, like $62 million deal, and it looks like all of that is guaranteed based on Spot Rack. I don't know if it's fully guaranteed. I would have to pull up Chris's article from when he signed, but I believe a majority of it is guaranteed. $62 million of it guaranteed, which is kind of crazy. But he becomes an unrestricted free agent after the 2027 season. So it's interesting to see how these contracts kind of even themselves out. And then you get into the players. If all are healthy, where would you go? And if you're talking about right now, this season, I think Dean Wade is in conversation to be the man coming off the bench because of his size, because of his reliability from three that's kind of dwindled this season and shooting around 30% from 3-point range. Max Strus not playing this entire season hurts him, right? But we also understand, as Jimmy mentioned, how important he is in the locker room and all those different things. So if we're going
to be clear, I was saying start Dean Wade just in that he's the most important guy. I'm not saying literally start Dean Wade, although maybe to the people of Dean Wade Island, I should start talking that way. But I'm saying Dean Wade, in terms of importance to the team, is my start guy.
Yeah, I get you. And I mean, we talked about lineup data a little bit earlier on this podcast, right? And we love the defensive numbers with Isaac, Evan, and Jared Allen. We also love the offensive numbers of those guys, right? And when you talk about Dean Wade and his efficiency with them as well, it's a little bit different because you talk about how important and impactful he is with them on the defensive end. It's a different type of acumen to have three different guys at 6'9.5" and above playing and being able to switch at the point of attack or in the painted area. So I think that is important when it comes to what the Cavs are thinking about when pairing these guys together. Dean Wade, Evan Mobley, and Jared Allen's defensive rating is 106.8 together, right? The offensive rating is 113.1, so a net rating of 6.3. Then you talk about the offensive rating of Jared Allen, Evan Mobley, and Isaac Okoro being 126.6 over 164 minutes together. The defensive rating of 113.4, net rating of 13.3, which is pretty nuts, right? The minutes between Jared Allen, Dean Wade, and Evan Mobley is 101. So it's a lot less because of injuries and all those different things. But I think if we're going based on this season alone, obviously we can all admit Isaac Okoro isn't going to shoot 50% from three for the season. That's just not realistic. He's shooting
To that point, can I
49
just
point.
real quick? I did a quick Isaac Okoro closest defender NBA stats thing. Would you
Mm-hmm.
like to guess how many 3-pointers Isaac Okoro has attempted this season when a defender is between 0 and 4 feet, which is what the NBA classifies as 0 to 2 is very tight, 2 to 4 is tight? The answer is 0.
Yep.
0. That's all I need to know right now. All of the Isaac Okoro. Now, that doesn't mean that people aren't closing out on him. It is a natural basketball instinct for a lot of players to say, "Oh my goodness, that guy's open. I can't let him shoot an open corner three." And that is, I mean, even in the playoffs in recent years, like Isaac Okoro is still forcing closeouts sometimes just because he's the most valuable shot in basketball. You can't just let the guy shoot it. Like there's a way to close out the right way against a guy like Isaac Okoro, who you wouldn't mind taking that shot, but you're gonna close out. My point is that I'm not really that interested in the Isaac Okoro 3-point numbers in the regular season when I'm sorry, maybe people are guarding him. He's not taking them when people are guarding him. 3-and-D wings make contested 3-pointers. 3-and-D wings strike fear in the defense. Isaac Okoro deserves so much credit for the way, there is a difficulty all to its own to being left alone like that, and basically like saying like, oh, you're not going to make that shot, and being on that stage with 18,000 people plus 5 dudes who don't believe in you watching you take that shot. That is hard enough. And we've seen early in Isaac's career how he struggled with that. He's getting better at that part. That is important. But teams don't respect it yet, or he doesn't trust it enough yet. It's a little bit of both. And I'm really just I'm not trying to hear the legit 3-and-D wing conversation until I see more legit 3-and-D wing behavior.
Okay, so let's finish this out by doing something a little different. Because I gave you the list of the Athletic, and I'll give it to you again if you need it. Who off this list would you think would be the best fit, but also would be the most plausible for the Cavs trying to obtain? Because I'm looking at the contracts currently of DeAndre Hunter and Cam Johnson. Cam Johnson has a $24 million contract this season, or a $22 million contract this season. Next season is $20 million, and the following season is 22 and a half. So, and then you look at DeAndre Hunter, he's at 21 this season, and then he gets a pay boost to 23 and 24.9 over the next 2 years. So that's going to be difficult unless you're like pairing one of these guys together, right? Because we talk about salary matching and all these different things. But when it comes to guys like, because I think those are two of the prototypes that the Cavs are looking for. To me, Dorian Finney-Smith might be a more accurate representation of the contract that the Cavs could plausibly go after because of what he's making, which is 12. This season he's making 14.9. He started his contract at 12.9. This season he's making 14.9, and then he has a player option at the 2025-2026 season at 15.3, and then he becomes an unrestricted free agent after the 2026 season. So, do the Cavs take a risk on that or anything? What do you think, Jimmy, when it comes to these kinds of guys? Cam Johnson, DeAndre Hunter, Bojan Bogdanovic, and Dorian Finney-Smith. Who makes the most sense?
Okay, so I want to group together DeAndre Hunter, Cam Johnson, and Dorian Finney-Smith because they kind of, Bogey, I think, is like, what is he, 6'6" or so? So I guess you could call him 6'5", maybe. You could call him a wing, but these like DeAndre Hunter, Cam Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith, these are your 3-and-D wings. These are your prototypical guys. I mean, Cam Johnson and DeAndre Hunter have a little bit more shake to them. Dorian Finney-Smith, more of a stationary shooter, but I think each of them are have the sort into their own category. DeAndre Hunter, former 4th pick in the draft. Double check how old DeAndre Hunter is real quick. DeAndre Hunter is 27. He's the youngest of this group, I believe. Let me make sure I'm not talking out of school here. Him and Cam Johnson are about the same age. But DeAndre Hunter is the long-term play. That's the guy. If you're trading for DeAndre Hunter, to me, that's a guy. That's like almost a new member of your core. Cam Johnson, I think, is probably your best. DeAndre Hunter, because he's been in that Hawks wing logjam with your Jalen Johnsons, your Bogies. Even like if we're talking on-ball reps, like Trae Young dominates the ball so much. Like DeAndre Hunter is a bet on. We think there's more here. He's shown a little bit this year, but we think there's more here. Cam Johnson is probably your best option for winning right now. He also might be your most expensive because he's having the best year of his career, and he fits to a T what you're looking for. Cam Johnson is a dead-eye three-point shooter. He is tall, long. He can defend. He's a guy. I mean, he's not like your. I'm not saying put Cam Johnson on Jason Tatum. Your job is done. I'm not saying that, but body type, that size profile is the kind of guy you need to guard other, apex predator type wings. I always think of like who would you want to put on prime Kawhi Leonard? 6'7" guy who's long and can do everything, can pull up over guys. Cam Johnson is your answer to your Isaac Okoro problem against the Celtics. All of these guys are. Isaac Okoro, great defensive player. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown can just, if they shoot a jump shot, they're not seeing Isaac Okoro's contest sometimes, right? So that's the other thing. Dorian Finney-Smith, probably your most cost-effective option. Just because he's not having the same year as a Cam Johnson. He doesn't have as much upside as a DeAndre Hunter. Like Dorian Finney-Smith is what he is. And I like that contract a whole bunch. I mean, that's 12, even 14 million. We're talking like below the MLE for a guy who could play 30 plus minutes for you per game in the playoffs. I kind of lean toward DFS because of that reason. I think he fits a lot of what you need. I think he's probably the least expensive in terms of assets of these three guys right now. Chris was talking multiple firsts for Cam Johnson. I will pass. And then DeAndre Hunter, the Hawks, your homegrown guys you're always going to value a little bit more. The Hawks are probably not looking to just give DeAndre Hunter away. So I think DFS would be the most sensible for a couple of different reasons there.
Yep, I think you're right. I think it's difficult when you talk about where the Cavs sit already when it comes to the luxury tax and all those different things and what they've built. And again, I feel like we end the podcast this way every time, but one move can deter the Cavs from the chemistry and camaraderie that they have built and worked so hard for over the last 3 years.
To that point, can I say this? I think Dorian Finney-Smith's probably your lowest maintenance guy, too. I mean, I think like DeAndre Hunter, part of the appeal for DeAndre Hunter getting out of Atlanta might be, I want to be able to go out somewhere and spread my wings. Like, is DeAndre Hunter, former top 5 draft pick, who has been in a kind of a logjam situation with the Hawks for a while here, is he ready to stand in the corner and shoot threes to win games? I think that's a fair question. Cam Johnson's been the star of the Nets, one of the stars of the Nets this year. I mean, Dennis Schroeder, who just got traded, was playing a large role. Cam Thomas never met a shot he didn't like either, but Cam Johnson has been one of their best players. Here, you are 4th max on the totem pole. All right, it's Donovan Darius Evan with a bullet. Jared Allen's probably going to score more than you just by virtue of being the dump off guy. Like, all right, Cam Johnson, like, are you as emboldened of a 3-and-D wing when you're running up and down for 35 minutes and getting 8 shots? How do you feel about that? He played that role in Phoenix. It worked for him, but he was trying to. There's a different hunger there because he's trying to carve out his role in the NBA. I think winning probably is a healthy motivator for every person in this situation. If you're going to trade to the Cavs, you're going to trade to a championship contender, so that should, and the Cavs' already very strong culture should entice guys to go along to get along. But I think, Dorian Finney-Smith at 31, kind of wasting away right now. That could be a big time sell for him. Is like, hey, do exactly what you're doing right now, just for a way better team. That's an easier plug and play envision for me.
I agree, and I definitely think Dorian Finney-Smith makes the most sense, but he isn't the best player when it comes to what the Cavs would like on this list. Obviously, I think we've narrowed it down to either DeAndre Hunter or Cam Johnson for the Cavs, especially when you talk about the length that they add on the defensive end and being someone that can knock down tray balls. I mean, we saw it about, and Chris loves to talk about Ty Jerome's game against the Cavs when he was with the Golden State Warriors and how that kind of put him on their radar. Not put him on their radar. They already wanted to pursue him, but kind of made a point that he is a guy that they could go get. And I think DeAndre Hunter had one of those games earlier on into the season, and it's like, all right, so what are we willing to give up to get this guy? But I think that's a conversation that will come if the Atlanta Hawks' asking price goes down, but I don't know if it will when they're also considered a dangerous team. Brian Windhorst went on record and said that the team that might be the most worrisome outside of the Boston Celtics, of course, for the Cavs in a playoff series could be the Atlanta Hawks. And I mean, they proved it already this season with how they've challenged them to start the year. But I don't want to get too long-winded here, and we are almost at the 50-minute mark, so I want to wrap up this episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to become a Cavs Insider and interact with Chris, me, and Jimmy by subscribing to Subtext. If you think we're talking out of our head and want to give us your opinion on where the Cavs stand in the trade market, what they could, should, or can do, even though they don't necessarily need to do anything at the trade deadline, this is where you can do that. So, to do so, sign up for a 14-day free trial or visit cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word STOP. It's easy, but we can tell you that the people who sign up stick around because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from me, Chris, and Jimmy. This isn't just our podcast, it's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through Subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.